Welcome back to the Wounds to Wisdom, Healing Through Veteran and First Responder Narratives. This is a series that we're doing for our book that's coming out in August. And what I'm doing now is I am going to interview another one of our authors. And these are all protectors that have hit a traumatic time or day, and they navigated their way out, and they don't want any other protector to suffer in silence. So their stories are just a great help for those that are suffering in silence and don't really know how to take that first step to healing. So today we have the Power of Our Story's good friend, Janet Wiszowaty. And Janet was a Royal Canadian Mounted Police dispatcher. She's retired now. And when I think about Janet, I think about somebody that is just a ton of fun, very young at heart, and just very passionate about helping others heal. So Janet, I want to welcome you here today. Thanks. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Sarah.
Janet, you know what? Let's start out with your younger self. What were you like when you were younger? What was it about kind of who you are that led you to wanting to be a dispatcher?
Well, actually, none of it, because I didn't have any confidence. I never thought I would ever be able to do something like that. I didn't even realize that a job like that existed. You know, somewhere in the back of the mind, you know that it's there. But I was a young mom at home with my kids, and they were 4 and 5, 5 and 6. And my husband was a Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer, and he gave me a call one day, and he says, "The boss wants to know if you're looking for a job." And I said, yeah. He says, we had been having trouble with babysitters. So I was at home with the kids and looking after other people's kids. And then he came home and he says, "Well, I've got all the paperwork ready." And it was to fill in for a maternity leave. So it was like 6 months temporary position. And I started in the administration comm center, and I loved it. I worked with some wonderful people. And then when that term was up, I said, well, I want to keep going. Like, I want to go permanent, and had that opportunity and did so. And that's when I ended up, we got transferred to Vancouver from Victoria. And that's when I got into the dispatch center. So it wasn't a planned thing. It was like, just happened. You know, being married to a police officer didn't give me a clue. Like it just, I'll give you an example. So when I had to work late one night and came home from work, and Les said, "Did you put in for overtime?" And I said, "No, voluntary overtime." Like, I had heard that so many times in the first 10 years we were married that I thought, hey, you told me that, and here I am. But different things, you know, we got to see the shoe on the other foot. He got to be at home alone at night with the kids while I was at work. And I got to see the other side, working with the officers and going to calls and being that person worrying on the other end of the radio when you couldn't get a hold of them. So then I saw it from his side too. So actually, you know, we've been married coming up 53 years. So it was a real learning experience for both of us, and we adapted.
And what was the hard part about being a dispatcher? Like, was there anything that happened in your time as a dispatcher that was traumatic? And what was that like, if so?
Yeah, there were lots of things, but you know what? We think of it as part of our job. I never thought of, you know, yeah, there was trauma. I joined in 1982, so you know, none of post-traumatic stress or anything like that was ever talked about. You know, we had a member that I was close to commit suicide or die by suicide, and I we were all shook up and nobody talked to us about it. Like the dispatch center, it was an entity on its own, and they didn't even think of our feelings and what would happen to us when something like that happens. And the worst calls that I took, I think, were involving children. And being a mother, and then later in the career looking after grandchildren, and that I took one call one night of middle of the night, 911. A little girl, probably about 7, called in, and I could hear noise in the background. Her mom was being beat up by a boyfriend. And there I am, knowing that my granddaughter might be in the same classroom as her and might be in the same school, and thinking, that poor girl, and there's nothing that I could do except get her some help. So really, in calls like that or emergencies, or during my career, we've had members I worked with that were ambushed and killed, and we carry that. We go on with the next call and stuff. What happened after a while, I didn't even realize it. My body fell apart years before it came to the point that I had to go and get help. And I didn't even think it had anything to do with my job at the time. And it was over a car accident, I thought. And it was a therapist that said, no, this has everything to do with your job. So, it's hard to describe. Like you go from one call to a next. Like you put the phone down, it rings again, and you deal with that call, and you just do it. And in order to help those people, you can't get emotionally involved. Like that little girl, all I wanted to do is just hang up, just go and hug her and keep her safe. And it's hard. I'm sure it's for dads too, if the little girl, they think of their families.
I keep hearing that it's really easy to connect that to their own families and to your own families. And it's just, now it's interesting because it's just very recent that dispatchers are actually first responders. I mean, weren't you clerical before? So you, even more than first responders, didn't have a place to actually process, all these calls that you have, and you never know what happened to them.
Well, we were never considered, my career with the Royal Canadian, we were civilian members, like we were sworn in. We never wore a uniform, but we fell under the RCMP Act as well. So, but that didn't mean that we got, they weren't even having, working with our officers. They didn't, when 4 of our officers were killed one night, they brought somebody in, and one of our dogmen were killed one night, and we were all really close to him. They had people come in that night and talk to us, but nobody ever did chickens. On saying that, I'll reiterate that we had to go every 2 years to see the psychologist and do a test, and then they would determine from that test where we were. But nobody ever really, as moms, you can hide a lot of stuff. And I'll say to anybody, there's not many psychologists that will be able to say to us bullshit. Sorry. Because we hide a lot. Doing, no, I'm fine.
Because why? Like, why would you hide a lot? Why would you hide that? Did you not feel safe? Did you?
No, if they knew something, if we were going through something, that was our career. Like there was no, there's different things now. They have help for people now so much. I didn't even see, I was totally out of that part of it. The force didn't have anything to do with my treatment with the psychologist, because I was off work because of a car accident. And so my psychologist, I didn't go to the RCMP psychologist, but the RCMP doctor, we had to be assessed by him whether we could go back to work or not and stuff. So it was very in-house. And I know of members that I worked with that, I don't know how the test came up, but they didn't come back to work. So, your career's
Yeah,
on the line. There wasn't help to get you to
mm,
the point to come back. But don't forget that was the 80s and 90s, and
yeah.
I had a long career, but I worked really hard to come back.
Tell
It
us about
wasn't
that,
through
Janet.
the
Like
force
what
that
Yeah, you got into this car accident and then you had a therapist tell you this is not from the car accident. This is from your work, right? That what was going on with you
yeah.
was actually from your work. It was trauma. You want to tell us more about that?
Yeah, and I'll just stress a little bit that any spouse, any family of a police officer can get vicarious trauma. There were things that happened as a spouse that would happen. My husband would come home and just act different and stuff. And it wasn't till weeks later I'd find out that two children had died that were the same age as our children. But it didn't come from him, and so I really, really want to stress that we have to take care of our spouses and our families too, um, because that's so important. For me, my body fell apart years before I was ever diagnosed, and there's so much more research to know that people's bodies, like I had um, fibromyalgia, and pulling muscles. I wasn't sleeping, just different things, but never was it ever thought that I was suffering from anything from to do with my job. And I had this. It was the fourth car accident in 10 years. They weren't my fault. Somebody hit me, and I counted them as in looking back. When you look back, you can connect the dots. That they were all taps. You know, time to change your life
Mm.
or do something different. And the last one was a real 2x4. It put me off work for a year. It immobilized me. I didn't break anything. I pulled all my abdominal muscles. I couldn't do anything. And when you've done your whole career stuffing stuff down and being busy with family and career and everything, when you have to be immobilized, you can't stuff that down anymore. And that's
Mm.
what happened. I call it the night the mask cracked, because I just one night, it just everything came up. I was sitting in the dark with, in our house, everybody was asleep, and I was crying, wishing I died in that car accident. And because my brain, I couldn't work because mentally I couldn't handle anything. The girls would come visit and they'd talk about a file, and I'd start crying. And so I definitely couldn't go back to work for that, in that state. And, but
Mm.
like I say, I had a great psychologist, and she gave me amazing, amazing tools to help me forward.
And I know it's so you are very passionate about so many things and helping people heal and thrive. You want to share what your passion focus is now because of everything that you have gone through, and then finally getting to that person that understood trauma. They were insightful, they saw what was going on with you and opened that door for you to go through and get the healing that you needed. What has that produced in you?
Well, the turning point came when the psychologist said to me, he says, "Oh, you don't have to work with me anymore." And I'm going, now what? Because when you work with somebody, especially on my case, uh, we had worked through a lot of things. So I was not the same person coming out of her office as I was going in. And so where do I go now? It's like I emptied that cup, there's a hole. How do you fill it? And it has to be filled. You have to fill it with something. And I think this is my own opinion. I think that the reason a lot of people don't go forward is because they don't have that help in going forward. And that's what was missing. And so, but I was determined not to go back there. And so I started taking courses, and I took some university courses. I did non-traditional courses. I took something called uh, personal best seminars, worked on myself. I took I trained with Jack Canfield in the success principles. And it was just bang, 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 just working on myself. But in working on myself, so much more insight came that this is the missing piece, I believe, in moving forward. You need to find a passion. You need to find something to keep you moving forward. And as you know, Sarah, it's for me, it's all about helping somebody move forward. It's giving them tools, giving them ideas. We don't know everything, right? And it's people that have shown up in my life that have taken me in a different direction. Meeting you and the group that we're part of for the over 4 years now, it's just been a blessing, and that's missing in a lot of people's lives.
I think so too. I think it's, of course, the power of our story is all about connecting through our stories because, it gives us the language and it helps us to understand our own stories. And then on the power of our story, we also help with vetted resources to share with one another. Um, and what are your favorite tools now to help? Do you have like some ways that you love to be able to help people with?
Well, I journal. I've written a chapter in a book on journaling. I have grown so much in that field in finding different tools, how journaling work. And when I started and I was asked to write this chapter on journaling, I thought, journaling, like, what do I know about journaling? But you know what? You'd be surprised how much you do know, because it's just another thing, another name. Journaling is writing. And so, writing a forgiveness letter, or like Natalie has love notes. It's part of her healing too. Was that it's meditation, and I learned all this through the different trainings that I've done. I'm still learning. I don't think I'll ever stop learning. Taking care and being okay, going for a massage, being okay to run a hot bath and just listen to some music if you want. Just that being okay with who you are, and taking care, recognizing when your body's not right. I've just been going through some back issues and seeing my chiropractor, but you know what? It's paying attention and listening to your body, and surround yourself with people who love and support you, right? Because that's most important.
Yeah. What would you tell your younger self when you were at home, you were with your kids, and you were just starting your dispatch job? Um, is there anything that you could have told your younger self that would have been a seed that, once things started happening in life, that you could have anchored into that maybe could have helped
Everything's
you
going to be
with, the
okay.
trauma that came up, that it's going to be okay?
Everything's okay. Everything's going to be okay. The hours and the time that I spent worrying about my kids, worrying about my members, worrying about what people think of me, you know, um, gossip, you know, I don't know how else to say it, but really let go of the people that don't support you. And and I don't mean say goodbye, you don't have to meet. There was one person that was quite negative in my life, and I love her dearly. And she moved far away. And so I didn't have to. I could still be in touch with her, but not around negativity. And so the thing is that the universe takes care of us. For a better word, God takes care of us. Our angels take care of us. Trust. Trust that everything's going to be okay. And enjoy your life, laugh. I did not realize till after I went through stuff with my psychologist that I hadn't laughed in a long time. Like really, really laughed, like really
Mm.
enjoyed life. Like I was busy, I was raising grandkids, I was working. And although I didn't realize it, I wasn't happy, healthy, or, uh, or having fun.
You kind of get into the busyness of life, and yeah, sometimes you don't realize that. Let me ask you something, because this is all about wounds to wisdom, and we want to help heal those veterans and first responders that are suffering in silence right now. They're not talking about it. They haven't maybe taken that first step of courage just to start the healing process. Um, you have been around so many first responders. You're a first responder yourself. You're married to one. What would be that first step of courage that you would share with somebody who is suffering in silence right now?
Do I would look for somebody to talk to. And you know what? It might even be a coach, but be careful who you talk to, right? If you talk to your friends about it, then it might end up in the gossip thing. Um, Find a cheerleader. Like I'll talk to anybody just to see where they're sitting. Um, and do some research on that, but watch people. Watch if you can find somebody that you've seen that maybe they haven't talked about it, but you've watched them go from one place to a better place. Ask them, how did you do that? Like,
Mm.
what changed in your life that got you there? Watch positive things. I don't watch the news. Somebody will tell me if something's going to happen. Like we didn't watch the Oilers game for the Stanley Cup, but somebody let me know they won. So, and they're in the finals, and it's things like that. So the Stanley Cup's coming back to Canada, guys. We're got our fingers crossed, but just and another thing is go back to your childhood. Like some people didn't have happy childhoods, but I think everyone still has some happy memories. And go back to what you're doing. Why did you want to do it? I was always volunteering. I was probably the youngest, and this is Canada's centennial year in 1967. I was the youngest volunteer, because I like doing stuff like that. So find something that you really, really gave you joy when you were a kid. My son loved to cook, and now he cooks all the time. He's 50. And just find something. If you love to read or you haven't read, find some positive books to read, like Jack Canfield. There's so many books. I trained with Jack. There's Joel Osteen. I've got one of his books here. There's just so many people that are writing wonderful things that'll help you. Find that group. If you find that there's a lot of negativity around you, do something to change it. Be the change. We can do that. We don't realize how much power we have. But watch a child. Listen to a baby laugh. Like there's nothing better than a baby. And you're hearing that now with your oldest grandchild probably. But when they laugh, it's a real belly laugh, and everybody wants to laugh. And
Yeah.
dance, put some music on in your house and dance away, whatever, but find something. One of the authors that I talk about, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and she says, take yourself on a date. Take yourself on a date. Not everybody, somebody will say, well, I want to go and do this, but I have nobody to go with. So what's wrong with taking yourself? Yesterday, I went for a walk. It was early. I went to a kids' playground. It's beautiful, beautiful playground. And I swung on the swings. Nobody was around. When's the last time you did that?
It's a very good question. Yeah. I love that. It's just, you're talking so much about like just being curious about different things. And, and
Yeah.
that is such a childlike trait. And then just getting back to like what you
Hmm.
said, what did you love to do when you were a child? And that's a very good indicator of kind of how you're wired and who you are. And, but I love that, just the curiosity that you have, and the, desire to try and research new things. And even like you said about the writing, there's so much data now that's out there in the healing power of writing your hard experiences, the hard experiences that you haven't processed yet. In fact, if you don't have somebody that you really trust, it's a great first step, isn't it? To just start writing
It is.
and,
And
helping to,
there's, yeah, there's so many things that you can do. So I'm facilitating a meditation journaling group right now once a week. And so I shocked them all, because one of the things I said, ask yourself a question, like write on then self and write a question, answer it with your non-dominant hand, and you'd be surprised what you write.
it uses a different part of the brain than you're used to, isn't it? Isn't that how that
Yeah.
works?
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
kind of process your story with a different part of your brain when you use the opposite hand. It's kind of fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
It's really cool.
But I love that because,
Yeah.
and you're really encouraging people. I know that like on your group there, you're doing a meetup group with the power of our story. And people are really enjoying that time to just kind of meditate, and the way that you create that group to have that place of safety where they can just sit quietly, enjoy the music that you put on, and start writing their story and start that healing process. It's just, this is what our book, a collaborative effort with all our first responders and veterans, it's this collaborative effort to say, listen, we've all been and reached that day. We've hit that wall. We've experienced that trauma. We understand. We understand the hardships, the isolation, the temptations. Many have wanted to take their life. But you all your stories share how you took that first step after something happened or a season, and what that first little courage, that step of courage going forward, how that opened more doors. And now your voice, your stories are what is helping other people heal that are still suffering in silence, and they're stuck and they're isolated. And you are the ones that are listening with no judgment, just saying, yeah, I get it. Me too.
And the
So
other thing is
I
not
just
to compare.
appreciate.
It's so easy. The other thing is not to compare. It is so easy to say, well, my trauma is not that person's trauma. Do you know what? Your trauma is your trauma. How it affects you might not affect somebody else the same way. And so that's so important to recognize. I know that when this book, the opportunity to write my story in this book, I was like, I know a lot of the people that are in the book, and I'm thinking, like, who wants to read my story? And we get there, and I know that sharing my story has made a difference for some people, but we get there. We're human. We have those doubts and stuff like that. And so just for your listeners to know, just because we wrote those stories doesn't mean that we've solved everything. We're still a work in
Yeah.
progress, but our progress is forward.
Yeah. And I'd like to even hop on that point too. I think you're right. What has been fascinating for me on the power of our story for the last 4.5 years, it's been fascinating to hear which stories helped which person. The flashy stories, sometimes like the Navy SEALs or the, Green Berets, those are very intense stories. They're intriguing, and they're inspiring. But there's not very many people who can actually relate to that kind of job or maybe that kind of experience. It's not that there's not a ton to learn from that, but sometimes kind of the stories that may feel to some people like this, oh, this is like an everyday common story. Well, look at all the everyday common people. I mean, just the magnitude of some of these more common stories, how they impact people so much. So I love that you brought that out. That if we start comparing our stories and then holding back because we don't think they're impacting enough, we never know how many people could have gleaned so much in that aha light bulb moment that could inspire somebody to take that first step of change could happen. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, Janet. And I really appreciate you being here today, talking with me, being a very loved author on Wounds to Wisdom, healing through veteran first responder narratives. And again, this book is coming out in August. And all these reels and, in this series and these interviews, you will be able to read all these authors' stories in a very succinct way and hear their advice about taking steps forward. So, Janet, again, I want to thank you so much for your courage and your generosity in sharing your story. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.